Hey guys, so I've been making these petty Yanagibas that are relatively straightforward. I have a waterproof belt grinder, which is it's identical brand and make and everything to a lot of the guys that make these Yanagibas in Japan. So I have sort of the luxury of being able to experiment making these yeah, with the same, at least one of the same tools that they have. These are forged, of course. Where's the little piece of carbon steel? Here. So they're forged from the mono steel, from the spring steel, the same of the rivet lock bulkos, the same as the rivet lock bulko along the picals and all that. It's a steel that I'm very familiar with, and I've used it on a whole bunch of knives, and I use my knives every day, and I rarely sharpen them. I don't need to sharpen them, so the steel is perfectly fine, especially because I'm not going for like a $500 product here. I'm trying to keep it like super simple. This is this was just purchased for 120 euros. So basically the price, you know, of a basic paring knife from a manufacturer, you know. So if you're gonna do a mono steel Yanagiba, you're a bit of a conflict, because if the steel is too hard, you're gonna have a really hard time sharpening it. And if the steel is too soft, you're gonna have a problem because it's a single bevel. But it's worked perfectly fine, and part of the reason I'm making these the way I am with this steel, you see, it's not the Yakut style. This is grounded out. It's basically a hollow grind, but with a slightly different technique. Yeah, it's to practice refining, making single bevels and Yanagiba style knives. So literally, like, why am I, I'm making paring knives, but the problem with just regular paring knives is that they're kind of dull and boring by themselves. So I'm doing single beveled kitchen knives, because for me, I feel like I would rather have this than a paring knife most of the time. These are I just prefer it, really. And they're relatively straightforward to make. The key thing that you got to be careful with is you don't really want to taper. You don't want to taper the edge, or the tip especially. But the spine you can maybe taper a little bit. But the trick really is you try to keep everything pretty straight and consistent when you're forging these, which is quite nice. A big mistake anybody makes when forging knives is that they over-forge the tip. You know, again, if you want a distal taper the spine, but don't taper the whole leading edge. Don't taper the tip. Keep the tip, you know, a couple centimeters, an inch or over, the same thickness as the whole edge. And then when you taper your spine, taper it from, but stop the taper here, and then do the rest with grinding. Otherwise, you're not going to get clean grinds. Clean, consistent grinds like that. It's going to be very difficult. See, like this one has a little bit of a forged tip. It's quite thin on the tip. When you're making a real Yanagiba, you are aiming, there are geometric requirements. And you do want like a centimeter from the tip, you want it to be like very thin, actually. Like I think it's like 0.7 millimeters. Now, I don't know, I haven't measured these. I don't want to scratch the blade either. It's not a big deal with these because they're not real Yanagibas. These are more like paring knives that take the Yanagiba shape, take the Yanagiba style construction. And the key thing with these, of course, is that if somebody is interested in a handmade single beveled knife or a Yanagiba style kitchen knife, they can get one of these and they can make all the mistakes that they want on this, you know. If they want to practice sharpening Yanagibas, or they want to practice, I got here and this is actually from a relatively famous maker. I have here, it's an eel knife, and this was like 150 euros that I paid for it, and I got it on discount. So, you know, quite expensive, but again, it's very different. These are, you know, forged. You can see the steel here, and you see how they avoid putting any steel along this part of the spine and tang. The tang is full iron. The actual steel that's laminated onto this, they put it on in a funny way where it goes here and there, but none of that steel actually goes here on this part of the spine. So this is iron. The whole tang is iron, and that's so when they quench, the tang doesn't warp like crazy. I've made a bunch like this type of bimetal knives, and when you quench them and you have like steel in the tang, it just, the whole thing, it's a pain in the ass to straighten. Much easier to straighten it when it's like this. But again, this is the work of a Japanese master. So very nice, very refined. The fit and finish is much nicer on camera than it is in person. These are relative. They're rough. They're like master rough, right? So, you know, for example, there and stuff. So, but they have been satin finished all over. So that's one thing. Like, these are satin finished. It's just some 120 grit, maybe even less sandpaper that they just brushed over the edge here. I mean, you can't see on camera so well, but again, that's just like they put it on the table, wash it quickly, done, you know, just to make it look appealing. But those are sharpening surfaces, this and this. Once you go on the stones the first time, you know, to thin behind the edge, because there is a micro bevel here, you know, all that satin finish comes off. So it's very thick too, actually. But again, we're not comparing the same type of knife here. I like this. I play around with this a lot for like snacks, even though it's for eels. But I look at it from time to time to look at the different types of finishes. You know, just to kind of mimic things. You know, so for example, they have a different finish here than they have here, right? So they're playing with different finishes in different areas to get like visual aesthetic things. For me, I'm trying to sort of avoid laminating stuff because I don't have a power hammer, and I have done a lot of laminating, and it sucks working all day. You do like 20 laminated profiles, and like 5 or 6 or 7 of them don't come through. They're fucked one way or another. And then there's the whole like quenching, heat treating, straightening. There's a lot of extra steps involved, which, you know, at the end of the day, it's very, very nice, but you're going to charge a lot more money for that. And there hasn't been any issues with using and these still warp, actually, when you quench them because of the shape they take. But either way, so basic handle. I put it at an angle, this kind of angle. You can't really see it on camera. It's pretty basic. And then this is a mechanical thing to keep those layers together. Like I've said in many, many videos, see the front, this is a cap that goes over these 3 layers, right? It's not just stacked on top. I preach about this all the time. And then for fun, I have I don't know if you can see it, I have a steel ring right in there around the tang. I haven't glued the blade in, so you can see like a little gap. But oh, there you can see the ring. So I actually machined a ring, steel ring, to fit at the front there. So it's a pretty complicated handle. It's quite quite intense in many ways, but still pretty basic, pretty simple on a simple blade. And every one of these I've made have sold within 10 minutes of putting up on the website. They just go. So there's something to it. And they're very simple for me to make. So here's the other one. I experimented with a different type of handle. Again, the ring at the front. Nice thing with black stabilized wood is like you can buff it and it looks really, really clean. With some other woods, if you buff them, they just get really dirty. So again, this is not a satin finish. This is like it's another type of Japanese finish on the bevel that's done on a contact wheel. And then I just sort of buffed it a little bit and put an edge. Traditional Yanagibas, people who use them, they don't like urochi on Yanagibas. They don't like a forged finish on Yanagibas. They don't want this. They don't like this. So I'm leaving it there just because it's my style, and these are basically paring knives that take the shape of a Yanagiba. I'm not trying to make a Yanagiba. I'm just practicing making them. But I'm leaving, you know, certain aspects there to simplify the process, you know, so that it's more realistic for me to make them and sell them at a decent price. So, you know, unique handle, very well built handle, very good heat treats. But yeah, I've already sold a few others, and these are a lot easier to make than a Yakult kitchen knives. It's a much easier steel to heat treat as well. So, but yeah, I'll be playing with different shapes and different sizes and stuff like that. But the idea is long and narrow and, you know, single bevel. And then I'm just practicing and practicing and practicing making single bevels. And I can't really make fillet knives. A, because they kind of need to be stainless steel. And then B, that's a lot of grinding to get them thin. And then C, like, personally, I prefer using Yanagibas or these type of knives for doing the fish work. So I'm not really a big fan of ultra thin, super floppy kind of fillet knives personally. So that's why I make these, because it's kind of like the, you know, another knife that you can use for pretty much the same process. And then for making quick meals and having fun in the kitchen doing stuff, this is really nice to use. You know, you can very easily cut super thin slices and peel stuff. Single bevels like this are great for peeling things like apples, or, you know, just peeling all sorts of random things, and then removing sinew from meat, like the silver stuff, all that. So I think overall, this design, this kind of Yanagiba style, petty Yanagiba, petty, you know, paring knife that's long and small like this, personally I think is much more versatile design than a lot of, you know, available stuff out there. And again, you know, a knife like this is pretty basic, right? It's just a classic grind. You know, I'm not really introducing anything new into the market when I'm making something like this, you know, and this is closer to one of those fillet knives than these, but so you can use this as a fillet knife if you want to, basically, but a lot of people use this on fish. But yeah, like, again, this is just a basic European style grind. I'm not bringing anything new to the table. I'm not going to be mastering anything that hasn't been, you know, that even, you know, manufacturers haven't already mastered. So when it comes to something like this, this is a skill I can develop that also sets me like uniquely placed in the competition that surrounds me. Like, for example, in Finland, nobody's making these, and if anybody else was making these, they would charge an exuberant amount of money for it, because there's a lot of people, it doesn't matter which culture you are, but a lot of people, they charge a little bit too much for what they do. And I think for 120 euros, you're really getting a lot of bang for the buck. Now, granted, that's without a sheath. So this one, the customer bought it for 120, and then the sheath was an extra 40. Now, the reason I do this is because the sheaths on knives that are this long and this big, you actually use up a huge amount of kydex. And most of the kydex I use are on much smaller knives and like scalpels, like these, where it's actually like makes sense. Not everybody needs a sheath with your kitchen knives, so I can keep the prices low. But yeah, it's pretty simple. It makes sense for a Yanagiba to come with a saya or a sheath. It really does. Especially when you have very delicate, you know, hand-finished edges and stuff like that. You really do want to protect it. So, again, we're not trying to make Yanagibas here. This is really just a knife design that I can focus and master producing, which is kind of like a cross between many things. And just a small, petty style, single bevel blade that I can produce, you know, relatively efficiently without too many failures, and then have fun with the handles and learn from my customers what they like and dislike about it. And that's about it, you know, just turning. I mean, you know, remember, this is, you know, these are super high-end spring steels, German, you know, spring steel, modern German spring steel. You know, it's not Hitachi White or 115 CRV3 like I use on my Yakut kitchen knives, which those Yakut kitchen knives are so difficult to make. They are unbelievably difficult to make compared to these. Even though it's kind of like, it looks all the same, but yeah, I don't really have much more to say. These are just another type of knife that I like to produce. They're really nice, really fun for me to make. On the they sell super quick, so if that's the case, I have to make more. And yeah, thank you guys for watching.